Hello there, and welcome to Subnautica Tales, where wonder drifts slowly through alien waters and mysteries unfold gently at the edge of sleep. Tonight, we are not going to focus on the creatures that swim through this ocean, magnificent as they are. Tonight, we are going deeper than biology, deeper than ecology. We are going into time itself, into the story of a civilization that rose, flourished, and vanished beneath the waves of planet 4546b long before any human ever looked up at the stars. We are going to explore the Precursors. Their name tells us almost everything and almost nothing. Precursors, those who came before us certainly, before any human set foot on this world, before the aurora fell burning from the sky, before survival became the only thought in a castaway's mind. But before what else? Before the creatures that swim here now, before the ocean itself took its current form, the answer, like so much about them, remains wrapped in silence and shadow. But the evidence of their existence is everywhere. If you know how to look, if you know how to listen, if you're willing to descend into the depths where their ruins still stand, their technology still hums, and their greatest tragedy still echoes through abandoned corridors. Before we begin this journey into the past, I'd love to know, where are you listening from tonight? What time has found you here, at the threshold of ancient mysteries? Perhaps the world around you has grown quiet, and you're seeking a different kind of story. Not the bright noise of the present, but the soft whisper of what came before. Whatever brought you here, I'm grateful. Some journeys are better taken together, even when we're travelling through time. If these gentle explorations help you find rest, if they offer a peaceful passage into sleep, I'd be so thankful if you'd consider liking this video or subscribing to the channel. It helps others find their way to these quiet waters too. But don't worry, I won't linger on it. That's just a small request before we slip beneath the surface of history. Now, let yourself settle, let your breathing slow, because the story we're telling tonight spans not years or centuries, but millennia, perhaps millions of years. Time moves differently when you're talking about civilizations that rose and fell while Earth was still figuring out what to do with dinosaurs. The first thing you notice when you encounter precursor architecture is how alien it feels. And that seems like a strange thing to say on an alien planet, where everything is alien by definition. But the coral tubes of the safe shallows, the towering creep vines of the kelp forest, the bioluminescent jellies of the deep, these things feel organic. They feel like nature, even if it's nature following rules different from Earth's. They feel like they belong. Precursor structures do not feel like they belong. They feel placed, intentional, constructed with a precision that speaks of minds capable of mathematics we haven't invented yet. They are made of materials that don't corrode, don't erode, don't yield to the patient pressure of water and time. After thousands upon thousands of years submerged in an alien ocean, they still glow, they still function, they still wait. The colour is distinctive, a green so particular it has no equivalent in nature. Not the green of plants or algae, but something cooler, more technological. Ion energy, some have called it, though that's a human term, imposed on something we don't fully understand. The precursors harnessed power sources that make our fusion reactors look like campfires, and traces of that power still flow through their abandoned facilities, illuminating corridors that no living precursor has walked in ages. Picture one of these structures now. Let yourself drift toward it through the water, your submarine's lights catching the geometric patterns etched into its surface. There are no curves here, no organic randomness. Everything is angular, deliberate, designed. Doorways open as you approach. Automatic systems still functioning after all this time, still responding to the presence of biological life, even life forms the precursors never knew would come. Inside, the water gives way to air. The precursors breathed, apparently, or at least they created spaces where breathing was possible. The chambers are vast, far larger than any human would need. Were the precursors giants, or did they simply think on a grander scale building monuments to their own ambition? We don't know. We have never found their bodies, we have never seen their faces. We know them only through what they left behind. And what they left behind tells a story of brilliance and hubris, of desperate hope and ultimate failure, of a civilization that reached across the stars, that conquered diseases and mastered technologies beyond our imagination, that built structures meant to last forever, and then vanished, leaving only ruins and silence, and questions that may never be answered. This is the story we're going to explore tonight. Not all of it, no single journey could contain all of it, but enough. Enough to understand what the Precursors were trying to do, enough to understand why they failed, and enough perhaps to feel something for them. Compassion maybe, or recognition. Because in their story, we might see shadows of our own. They came to 4546b for a reason. They built their facilities here with purpose. They imprisoned one of this world's most ancient creatures, the Sea Emperor Leviathan, in a desperate attempt to save themselves. And in the end, despite all their power, all their knowledge, all their technology that still hums in the darkness, they could not escape the fate they feared most. But that is getting ahead of ourselves. Tonight, we will take this journey slowly. We will visit their ruins. We will read their records. We will stand in the chambers where they worked and hoped and despaired. And we will try to understand not just what happened to them, but what it means for us, what it means for any civilization that reaches too far, grasps too tightly, believes too completely in its own power to overcome the universe's indifference. The Precursors are gone. Their empire, which once spanned multiple star systems, has collapsed into silence. Their great works have crumbled or been forgotten on 100 worlds. But here, on 4546b, their legacy remains. In the structures that still stand, in the technology that still functions, in the creature they imprisoned, who still waits in the depths, who still remembers what they did, who still holds, even now, the key to the very cure they sought so desperately. Let yourself drift deeper now. Let the present moment fade. We are going back through the millennia, back to a time when the Precursors still walked, or swam, or floated, or whatever form of locomotion they used. Back to the beginning of their story on this world. The water grows darker around us. The ruins grow larger, and somewhere in the distance, the faint green glow of ion energy beckons us forward. The Precursors are waiting. They have been waiting for a very long time. To understand what happened to the Precursors on planet 4546b, we must first understand what they were before they came here. And that requires us to think on scales that human minds find difficult to grasp. Not the scale of nations or continents, but the scale of galaxies. Not the scale of centuries, but the scale of epochs. The Precursors were not simply a civilization. They were an empire, an interstellar presence that extended across multiple star systems, multiple worlds, multiple environments, so diverse that the ocean planet we're exploring tonight was just one small outpost in a vast network of controlled space. They had mastered faster than light travel, or something functionally equivalent, allowing them to move between stars the way we move between cities. They had conquered diseases that would have ended lesser species. They had built structures that endured for millennia. They had, by any measure we might apply, achieved something close to what humans dream of when we dream of the future. Let yourself imagine it. An empire of stars, ships moving through the darkness between suns, carrying precursor minds and precursor ambitions to world after world. Facilities rising on planets of ice and planets of fire, on moons orbiting gas giants, on asteroids drifting through the void. Wherever they went, they built. Wherever they built, they left their mark. That distinctive green glow, those angular geometries, that sense of deliberate, confident construction that says we were here and we meant to stay. We don't know how long this empire lasted. The records we found on 4546b are fragmentary, corrupted by time and damage, written in languages and symbol systems that human translators have only partially decoded. But the evidence suggests duration measured not in centuries, but in tens of thousands of years, perhaps hundreds of thousands. An empire that had existed for longer than Homo sapiens has walked the earth. An empire that had, in that vast span of time, encountered countless challenges and overcome them all. Until they encountered one they couldn't overcome. But we're getting ahead of ourselves again. For now, let's stay with the image of the empire at its height. Let's imagine what it must have felt like to be a precursor in those golden ages. If they had ages, if they experienced time the way we do, if feelings were something their minds produced. Let's imagine the confidence, the certainty, the absolute assurance that comes from belonging to a species that has bent the universe to its will. They must have felt invincible. How could they not? They had solved problems that other species couldn't even formulate. They had built wonders that would outlast stars. They had spread so far across the galaxy that no single catastrophe could threaten their existence. If one world fell, 100 others would remain. If one facility failed, 1,000 others would continue. They had redundancy. They had resilience. They had, or so they believed, transcended the fragility that dooms lesser civilizations. And perhaps this confidence was their first mistake. Perhaps it was the seed of everything that followed. Because the universe has a way of humbling those who believe themselves beyond humbling. It has a way of finding the one weakness that no amount of planning anticipated. It has a way of reminding even the mightiest empires that they are, in the end, just arrangements of matter and energy. And matter and energy can be rearranged. The Precursors encountered many species in their expansion across the stars. Most were primitive by their standards, creatures still bound to single planets, still struggling with basic survival, still millions of years away from anything resembling interstellar capability. These species posed no threat. They were curiosities at best, obstacles at worst. The Precursors catalogued them, studied them, and moved on. But some species were different. Some had developed in ways that caught Precursor attention, and one species in particular, we don't know their name. We don't know what they looked like. We know almost nothing about them except the legacy they left, would change everything. This species had developed biological weapons, not the crude toxins and pathogens that early civilizations sometimes create, but something far more sophisticated, something designed at the molecular level to infiltrate, to spread, to persist, something that could jump between species, between ecosystems, between worlds, something that the Precursors, for all their technology, could not easily stop. The Kara. Even now, millennia after its first appearance, the name carries weight. You can feel it in the data terminals scattered throughout Precursor facilities TIA 4546b, the shift in tone when the records begin to mention the bacterium. The clinical detachment gives way to something else, urgency, concern, and eventually something very close to fear. The Carabacterium was not merely a disease, it was, in its way, a masterpiece of biological engineering. It could infect almost any carbon-based life form. It could adapt to immune responses, evolving faster than defences could be developed. It could spread through physical contact, through water, through air. And it was, as far as the Precursors could determine, completely incurable. We don't know exactly how the Precursors first encountered the Kara. The records from that period are sparse, damaged, or perhaps deliberately destroyed. But we know that the encounter was catastrophic. World after world fell to the spreading infection. Populations that had thrived for millennia were reduced to shadows. The great Precursor empire, which had seemed so invincible, began to crumble from within. Imagine the panic. Imagine the disbelief. For a civilization that had overcome every challenge, that had built an empire spanning light years. The idea that a simple bacterium could threaten their existence must have seemed absurd, impossible, a cruel joke played by a universe they thought they had mastered. But the Kara didn't care about their disbelief. It continued to spread. It continued to kill. And the Precursors, for the first time in their long history, found themselves facing a problem they could not solve. They tried everything. Their medical technology, so advanced that it could repair damage humans would consider fatal, proved useless against the bacterium's constant evolution. Their quarantine protocols, designed to contain conventional outbreaks, failed against a pathogen that seemed almost intelligent in its ability to find new vectors of transmission. Their weapons, capable of destroying entire cities, could not target something so small, so pervasive, so thoroughly integrated into the biological systems of the infected. The empire that had spanned stars began to contract. Worlds were abandoned. Facilities were sealed. Populations that had numbered in the billions were reduced to thousands, then hundreds, then nothing at all. The Precursors were dying, and they could not stop it. But they were not a species prone to despair. Even in the face of extinction, they continued to search for solutions. They sent expeditions to distant worlds, looking for organisms that might hold the key to a cure. They built research facilities dedicated entirely to understanding the Kara, to finding its weaknesses, to developing some way, any way, to neutralize it. And one of those expeditions came here, to planet 4546b, to an ocean world teeming with life forms they had never encountered before, to a place where, they hoped, they might finally find what they were looking for. They did not know, when they first arrived, that this world would become both their greatest hope and their final tomb. They did not know that the creature they would find here, the ancient being who had swum these waters since before the Precursors existed, would hold the secret they sought. And they did not know that their desperation would lead them to commit acts that would echo through millennia, shaping the fate of every creature on this planet. They came to 4546b as conquerors, as they had come to so many worlds before, but they would leave as ghosts. Their empire collapsed, their people extinct, their legacy reduced to ruins and silence, and the slow decay of abandoned dreams. The water around us grows darker as we contemplate this history. The weight of millennia presses down, like the weight of the ocean itself. Somewhere ahead, the first of the Precursor facilities on this world waits for us, still glowing, still functioning, still holding the records of what happened here. Act 3. Arrival on an ocean. World picture the moment of arrival. Somewhere in the distant past, thousands of years ago, perhaps tens of thousands, a Precursor vessel descended through the atmosphere of planet 4546b. Below it, an ocean stretched to every horizon. No continents, no mountain ranges breaking the endless blue. Just water, vast and deep, and teeming with life forms that had never seen anything from beyond their world. What did the Precursors think when they first surveyed this planet? Did they feel wonder, as we might feel wonder, at the sheer abundance of life swimming through those alien waters? Did they appreciate the beauty of the coral formations, the grace of the leviathans, the delicate balance of ecosystems that had evolved over millions of years without any outside interference? Or did they see only resources, only potential, only another world to be catalogued and exploited in their desperate search for a cure? We cannot know their thoughts. We can only read their records, and those records are clinical, detached, the language of scientists documenting specimens, not poets marvelling at beauty. Perhaps that detachment was necessary. Perhaps facing extinction they could not afford to be distracted by wonder. Perhaps they had seen so many worlds, catalogued so many species, that novelty itself had become routine. But whatever they felt, they recognised immediately that 4546b was special. The biodiversity was extraordinary, Life had evolved here in directions the precursors had never encountered before. Creatures that glowed with bioluminescence in patterns that seemed almost purposeful. Organisms that had developed electrical systems, thermal regulation, chemical defences of remarkable sophistication. And most intriguingly, several species showed unusual resistance to bacterial infection, a trait that, in their desperate circumstances, immediately caught precursor attention. They began to build. The first facilities were research stations, positioned throughout the ocean to study different biomes. Small outposts by precursor, standards, staffed by scientists whose task was to catalogue every species they could find, to analyse their biology, to search for anything that might help in the fight against the Kara. They worked methodically, as the precursors always worked. They collected samples, they ran experiments, they filed reports that were transmitted back to whatever remained of the Empire's central authority. Let yourself drift now, toward one of these early research stations. It sits on the edge of the grassy plateaus, where gentle currents stir the red grass and reefbacks drift overhead like living islands. The structure is modest compared to what the precursors would later build here. Just a few chambers, a handful of data terminals, equipment for basic biological analysis. But even this small outpost demonstrates their technological mastery. The walls are seamless, the systems are self-maintaining. After thousands of years of neglect, the lights still glow and the doors still open. Inside you find records, observations of the local fauna, notes on the reefbacks, their size, their migratory patterns, the remarkable ecosystems that develop on their backs. Notes on the stalkers, their intelligence, their curious habit of collecting metal objects, their social structures. Notes on dozens of species, large and small, each one analysed with the clinical precision of researchers who had no time for sentiment. But there are also notes of frustration. The species here showed promise, but none provided the breakthrough the precursors needed. The bacterial resistance they observed was interesting, but insufficient. The biological mechanisms were novel, but not applicable to precursor physiology. Month after month, or whatever unit of time the precursors used, the research continued, and month after month, the cure remained elusive. And then they found her. We don't know exactly when or how the precursors first encountered the Sea Emperor Leviathan. The records from that period are fragmentary, as if the discovery was so significant that normal documentation protocols were abandoned in the excitement. But we know that when they found her, everything changed. The Sea Emperor was unlike anything they had catalogued before. Ancient beyond their ability to measure, her species had swum these waters for millions of years, evolving in isolation, developing in ways that had no parallel anywhere in the precursor database. She was immense, yes, larger than any creature they had encountered on any world. But size alone would not have captured their attention so completely. What captured their attention was her immunity. The Sea Emperor Leviathan was completely, absolutely, inexplicably immune to the Kara bacterium. Her biology had developed defences that neutralised the pathogen entirely. Not just resistance, immunity, total and permanent. The thing that was destroying their empire, that had killed billions of their kind, that had resisted every treatment and cure they had attempted, it simply could not survive in her presence. Imagine the moment of that discovery. Imagine the precursor scientists, exhausted from years of failure, suddenly confronted with evidence that a cure was possible, that this ancient creature, swimming through an ocean they had almost dismissed as another dead end, held within her body the key to their survival. The excitement must have been overwhelming. The hope must have been almost painful, after so much despair. Here, finally, was the answer they had been searching for. Here was salvation, swimming through the depths of an alien sea. But the Sea Emperor was not simply a resource to be harvested. She was intelligent, telepathic even, capable of projecting thoughts and images directly into the minds of other beings. When the precursors approached her, she knew. She understood what they wanted, and according to the records we found, she was willing to help. This is one of the great tragedies of the precursor story. The Sea Emperor, despite having no obligation to these alien visitors, despite having existed for millions of years without any contact with the outside universe, offered them assistance. She recognized their desperation. She felt perhaps something like compassion for a species facing extinction, and she told them that she could produce a substance, an enzyme, that would neutralize the Kara. But there was a condition. The enzyme could only be produced by her young. Infant sea emperors, hatched from eggs that she alone could provide. And for those eggs to hatch, for her young to be born, she needed to be in her natural environment. She needed the ocean. She needed freedom. The precursors faced a choice. They could work with the sea emperor, allow her to reproduce naturally, and hope that the enzyme her young produced would be enough to save their people. This would require patience, trust, a willingness to depend on a creature they did not control. Or they could take control. They could capture the sea emperor. They could build a facility to contain her. They could attempt to force the production of the enzyme through technological means, bending her biology to their will as they had bent so many other aspects of the universe. We know which choice they made. In the deepest part of the ocean, far below the reach of any natural light, the precursors began construction on the largest facility they had ever built on 4546b. They called it the Primary Containment Facility. It would be a prison designed to hold a creature the size of a leviathan. It would be a laboratory where they could study her biology in controlled conditions. And it would be, they believed, the place where they would finally produce the cure that would save their empire. The Sea Emperor did not go willingly. How could she? She had offered cooperation, and they had responded with chains. She had offered trust, and they had responded with imprisonment. She was taken from the ocean she had known for millions of years and placed in a tank, vast by any other standard, but impossibly small for a creature who had swum freely through the endless deep. And there she remained, for thousands of years. Alone in the darkness at the bottom of the world, waiting for children who could not be born, holding within her body a cure that the precursors would never successfully extract. The facility still stands. The Sea Emperor still waits. And the story of what the precursors did here, the hubris, the desperation, the ultimate futility, is written in every corridor, every data terminal, every silent chamber where ancient machines still hum with power they no longer need. We will visit that facility before our journey ends, but first let us understand more fully what the precursors built, what they attempted, and why, despite all their power, they failed. The water grows colder around us, the light fades to memory, and somewhere far below, the primary containment facility waits, keeping its prisoner and its secrets in the darkness, where no sun has ever shone. Act 4. The Architecture of Desperation. When a civilization faces extinction, it builds differently. The structures are no longer monuments to achievements or expressions of an aesthetic vision. They become something rawer, more urgent. Every wall, every corridor, every system serves a single purpose: survival. And you can feel that desperation in precursor architecture on 4546b if you know how to look. You can feel it in the scale of their constructions, in the redundancy of their systems, in the sheer relentless determination that drove them to build facilities that would outlast their own species. Let yourself drift now through the waters above the disease research facility. It sits in the Lost River, that impossible place where an ancient waterway flows beneath the ocean itself, where the bones of leviathans long dead rest in beds of green brine. The precursors chose this location deliberately, remote, hidden, protected by layers of water and rock from anything that might disturb the work being done within. The facility emerges from the darkness, like a memory of ambition. Its angular walls glow with that distinctive green luminescence, ion energy still flowing through conduits after thousands of years. The structure is massive, multiple wings, multiple levels, chambers upon chambers, dedicated to the single-minded pursuit of understanding the Kara bacterium. Here, precursor scientists worked around the clock, analysing samples, running simulations, testing treatments that failed again and again and again. Inside, the air is still breathable. The precursors built their facilities to last, and last they have. Data terminals line the walls, each one containing fragments of research, observations, hypotheses. Reading them now, you can trace the arc of their work, the initial optimism, the gradual frustration, the mounting despair as every avenue of investigation led to dead ends. They understood the Kara better than anyone had before. They mapped its structure at the molecular level. They documented its life cycle, its mechanisms of infection, its remarkable ability to adapt to any immune response. They knew, with terrible precision, exactly how it was killing them. What they could not discover was how to stop it. The records speak of experiments, thousands of them, tens of thousands. They tested every compound they could synthesize, every biological agent they could harvest, every technological intervention their advanced science could devise. Nothing worked. The bacterium evolved around every obstacle, found every weakness, exploited every gap in their defenses. It was, as one terminal describes it, a perfect predator at the microscopic level, designed to survive, designed to spread, designed to kill. Designed. That word appears often in the later records. The precursors became convinced over time that the Kara was not a natural pathogen. It was too perfect, too targeted, too precisely engineered to destroy complex life forms. Someone had created it. Someone had unleashed it, whether deliberately or accidentally, and that someone had succeeded in creating something that even the precursors, with all their mastery of science, could not undo. The knowledge must have been maddening, to know that they were dying because of someone else's creation, to know that the weapon destroying their empire was artificial, designed, intentional. Was it an act of war? A research project gone wrong? A punishment from some cosmic force they had offended? The records do not say. Perhaps the precursors never learned the answer. Perhaps they were too busy dying to pursue the question. But they did not give up. That is the remarkable thing about the precursor story. The absolute refusal to accept defeat, even when defeat seemed certain. Facility after facility, experiment after experiment, year after year, they continued to search for a cure. They built the disease research facility to study the bacterium. They built the primary containment facility to imprison the Sea Emperor. They built quarantine enforcement systems, automated guardians designed to prevent the spread of infection to uncontaminated worlds. The Warpers were one such creation. Let yourself picture them, those unsettling beings that still patrol the waters of 4546b, teleporting through space with disturbing ease, attacking anything that shows signs of infection. They are not natural creatures. They are constructs, biological machines designed by the precursors to maintain their quarantine protocols. Even now, thousands of years after their creators vanished, they continue their work. They cannot be reasoned with. They cannot be negotiated with. They simply execute their programming endlessly because that is what they were built to do. There is something tragic about the Warpers. They are perhaps the clearest example of precursor desperation, the willingness to create something monstrous in the service of survival. The precursors who designed them must have known what they were making, must have understood that these creatures would continue their grim work long after anyone remained to give them new orders. But they built them anyway because the alternative was extinction, and so the Warpers patrol, and so the facilities hum with power, and so the disease research facility still stands in the Lost River, filled with records of experiments that failed and hopes that died. Walking through its corridors, or swimming or floating, however one navigates these ancient spaces, you feel the weight of that history. Every terminal tells a story of disappointment. Every chamber was the site of work that ultimately proved futile. The Precursors poured their greatest minds, their most advanced technology, their last reserves of hope into this facility and others like it, and none of it was enough. But they did make one discovery that changed everything. Not in the disease research facility itself, but in the data it collected about the creatures of 4546b. The Sea Emperor's immunity was not merely passive resistance, it was active production. Her body created enzymes that did not just neutralize the Kara, they destroyed it. Completely, permanently. The records from the period of this discovery are almost feverish in their excitement. After years of failure, here was proof that a cure was possible. Here was evidence that somewhere in the biology of this ancient creature lay the key to salvation. All they had to do was understand it, replicate it, produce enough of it to cure a dying empire. They transferred their efforts to the primary containment facility. The disease research facility became secondary, a support structure for the main project. And in the depths of the ocean, the real work began, the attempt to extract from the imprisoned Sea Emperor the enzyme that could save them all. But the enzyme would not come. The Sea Emperor, isolated from her natural environment, separated from the ocean she had known for millions of years, could not produce what they needed. Her biology required conditions they could not replicate. Her young, who would naturally produce the enzyme in abundance, could not be born in captivity. The eggs she carried remained dormant, waiting for hatching conditions that the Precursors could not provide. The irony is almost unbearable. They had the cure within their grasp. They had the creature who could save them, contained in a facility designed to study her every biological function. And still, the cure remained out of reach. Not because they lacked the technology, not because they lacked the knowledge, but because they had chosen imprisonment over cooperation, control over trust, force over freedom. The Sea Emperor had offered to help them willingly. She had offered her young, her enzyme, her salvation freely given. But the Precursors could not accept help they did not control. They could not trust a creature they did not dominate, and so they took her prisoner, and in doing so, they sealed their own fate. The disease research facility fell silent. The scientists, one by one, succumbed to the infection they were trying to cure. The automated systems continued to function, recording data that no one would ever read, maintaining power that no one would ever use. And in the darkness of the lost river, the facility became a tomb, a monument to desperation, to brilliance, to ultimate failure. It remains there still. The terminals still glow. The records still wait. And if you swim through its corridors today, you can almost hear the echoes of those ancient scientists working through the night, refusing to accept that their work was doomed. They built so much. They learned so much. And in the end, it was not enough. Let the silence of the facility wash over you. Let the green light of ion energy illuminate the darkness. And let yourself feel for a moment the weight of a civilization's last hope, turning slowly to despair. There is a place on 5546b where the ocean reaches its deepest point, where the pressure would crush any unprotected body, where the darkness is so complete that even bioluminescence seems like an intrusion, a violation of the natural order of absolute black. And it is here, in this most hostile of environments, that the Precursors built their greatest structure, their most ambitious project, their final hope, the primary containment facility. Let yourself sink now. Sink past the familiar biomes, past the kelp forests and the grassy plateaus, past the mushroom forests and the blood kelp zones. Sink through the lost river, where the bones of ancient leviathans watch your passage with empty eyes. Sink through the inactive lava zone, where the heat of the planet's core warms the water and volcanic structures glow with sullen orange light, and then sink further still, through passages that seem carved by intention rather than nature, until you reach a place where even the lava fades and the true deep begins. The facility appears gradually, first just a suggestion of structure in the darkness, angles too precise to be natural, surfaces too smooth to be geological. Then, as your lights penetrate deeper, the full scale becomes apparent, and that scale is staggering. The primary containment facility is not merely large, it is colossal, a structure so vast that it seems to have been built by giants for giants. The main chamber alone could contain entire city blocks. Corridors stretch for hundreds of meters. Support systems and subsidiary chambers branch off in every direction, creating a labyrinth of precursor technology that would take days to fully explore. And at the centre of it all, in a tank designed to hold the most precious prisoner in the universe, waits the Sea Emperor Leviathan. She is ancient. That is the first thing you feel when you encounter her. Not her size, though she is immense, but her age. She has existed for so long that time itself seems to bend around her presence. Her species swam these waters when the continents of Earth were still forming. She has witnessed geological epochs pass like seasons. She has watched species rise and fall, ecosystems transform, the very chemistry of the ocean shift and stabilise, and shift again. And now she waits, in a tank, in darkness, imprisoned by beings who came to her world, uninvited, and took from her the freedom she had known for millions of years. Her body glows with soft bioluminescence, not the aggressive brightness of predators trying to attract prey, but something gentler, something almost sorrowful. Tendrils drift from her massive form, moving with currents that exist only in her immediate space. Her eyes vast and dark and filled with something that looks very much like wisdom. Watch everything that enters her prison. And she speaks, not in words, not in any language that vocal cords could produce. She speaks directly into the mind, projecting images and emotions and concepts that bypass the ears entirely. Her voice, if voice is even the right word, is calm, patient, sad in a way that transcends sadness, that encompasses millennia of loneliness and loss. The Precursors heard her voice too. The records make this clear. From the moment of her imprisonment, she attempted to communicate with them. She tried to explain what they were doing wrong. She tried to tell them that the enzyme they sought could not be produced under these conditions. She tried again and again to offer cooperation instead of captivity. They did not listen. Perhaps they could not listen. Perhaps their desperation had become so consuming that they could not process information that contradicted their chosen course. Or perhaps they simply did not trust her. She was, after all, an alien creature, ancient and powerful and impossible to fully understand. How could they know that her communications were genuine? How could they be certain that she was not manipulating them, deceiving them, leading them towards some goal of her own? And so they continued their experiments. They studied her biology with every tool at their disposal. They analysed the enzyme she produced in her natural state. Traces of it, fragments, not nearly enough to cure an empire, but enough to confirm that she was indeed the source they sought. They attempted to replicate the enzyme artificially, to synthesize it in their laboratories, to find some way to produce it without depending on her cooperation. They failed. Every attempt failed. The enzyme was too complex, too precisely tuned to her specific biology, too dependent on conditions they could not replicate. It was, the records note with evident frustration, irreducibly biological, a product of millions of years of evolution that could not be shortcut through technology. And still they did not release her. Still, they did not attempt cooperation. Still, they clung to control, to domination, to the belief that if they just studied her long enough, experimented enough, applied enough technological force, they would eventually break through. The The Sea Emperor watched all of this with patience that defies human comprehension. She did not rage against her captivity. She did not attack her captors. She simply waited and communicated and hoped that eventually they would understand what she was trying to tell them. Her eggs remained dormant throughout this period, thousands of years of dormancy, waiting for hatching conditions that the precursors could not provide. Inside those eggs, infant sea emperors waited to be born, creatures who would produce the enzyme in abundance, who could have provided enough cure to save an entire empire if only they could have been allowed to hatch. The precursors knew about the eggs. They studied them intensively. They tried everything they could think of to induce hatching. Temperature variations, chemical stimulants, radiation, direct manipulation of the egg casings themselves. Nothing worked. The egg seemed to be waiting for something that the facility could not provide, something environmental, something that required the ocean itself, not a tank within a prison. The Sea Emperor tried to explain this. Her communications to the precursor scientists were clear on the point. The eggs needed specific conditions that existed only in certain parts of the ocean. The enzyme-producing young could be born, but not here, not in captivity. She needed to be released. Her young needed to be released, and in return, she would give them everything they sought. They did not believe her, or they could not accept what she was offering. After so much investment in the facility, after so many resources poured into containment and study, how could they simply let her go? What if she was lying? What if she fled to the deepest ocean and never returned? What if this was all an elaborate deception, and releasing her would mean abandoning their last hope? The fear paralyzed them, the desperation blinded them, and the clock continued to tick. Outside the facility, the current spread. Precursor after precursor succumbed to the infection. The outposts on 4546B fell silent, one by one. The staff of the primary containment facility itself began to die, their bodies succumbing to the very disease they were trying to cure. The automated systems registered each death, filed each report, maintained each record with mechanical indifference, and the Sea Emperor watched, patient, sorrowful, still offering help that no one remained to accept. The last precursor on 4546B died thousands of years ago. The exact date is recorded somewhere in the facility's databases, though the meaning of that date is lost to us now. One final entry, one final log, one final moment of consciousness before the silence became permanent. But the facility did not stop functioning. The precursors built too well for that. The power systems continued to operate. The containment fields, whoosh, remained active. The prison held its prisoner, even though the jailers were gone, and the Sea Emperor remained. Alone in the dark, waiting for someone, anyone, who might finally listen to what she had been trying to say all along. She is still there, still waiting, still hoping. After thousands of years of solitude, her patience has not wavered. Her offer has not been withdrawn. The cure is still possible. The enzyme can still be produced. The eggs can still hatch if someone provides the conditions they need. All it requires is trust. All it requires is cooperation. All it requires is the one thing the precursors, in their desperation, could never bring themselves to give. Act 6. The silence after empire. There is a particular quality to silence in places where great activity once occurred. It is not the same as the silence of places that have always been quiet. It carries weight, memory, the echo of voices that no longer speak, of footsteps that no longer fall, of purposes that no longer drive forward through the hours. This is the silence that fills every precursor facility on 4546B, the silence after empire. Let yourself rest in that silence now. Let the hum of ancient machinery fade to background. Let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of a world that has been waiting, patiently, for thousands of years. The precursors are gone. Their great works continue to function, but the minds that designed them, the hands that built them, the hopes that animated them, all have passed into the void that awaits every living thing. How did it end? Not with a single catastrophic event, not with explosions or collapses or dramatic final moments. It ended the way most things end, gradually, quietly, one small failure at a time. The records allow us to reconstruct the final days with painful clarity. The infection spread through the remaining precursor population on 4546b, despite every precaution, every quarantine protocol, every desperate measure. The disease they had come here to cure found them anyway. It moved through the facilities like a whisper, touching one researcher, then another, until the laboratories fell silent and the corridors emptied and the great project ground to a halt. They knew they were dying. The later records make this clear. There is a shift in tone as the end approaches, a movement away from clinical observation towards something more personal. Final messages, last thoughts, the kinds of things beings write when they know no one will come to save them. One terminal in the disease research facility contains what appears to be a personal log. The translation is imperfect, but the meaning comes through. A precursor scientist, infected and failing, writing their final observations. Not about the Kara, not about the research, about the view from the facility window, the green glow of the brine river, the bones of ancient creatures resting in the sediment, the strange beauty of a world they had come to study and would never leave. We came here seeking salvation, the log reads approximately. We found only ourselves, the same fears, the same failures, the same inability to see what was offered until it was too late to accept. What was offered? The phrase echoes through the empty corridors. The Sea Emperor had offered cooperation, partnership, a freely given cure in exchange for freedom and trust. And the precursors, brilliant as they were, powerful as they were, could not accept it. They could not let go of control long enough to receive a gift. Is this the lesson of their story? Is this what their ruins are meant to teach us? That knowledge is not enough, that technology is not enough, that power itself is not enough if it is not accompanied by wisdom, by humility, by the capacity to trust something beyond your own understanding. The silence does not answer. The silence never answers. It simply holds the question, as it has held it for millennia, waiting for someone to come and sit with it and wonder. Other terminals contain other final messages. Some are angry, raging against the unfairness of extinction, against the bacterium that would not yield, against whatever species had created it and unleashed it upon the galaxy. Some are resigned, accepting death with a calmness that speaks of exhaustion, of hope expended, of nothing left to fight for. Some are addressed to beings who would never receive them, family members on distant worlds, already dead or soon to die, separated by light years and the collapse of everything that had once connected them. One message, found in a subsidiary chamber of the primary containment facility, is addressed simply to whoever comes after. It assumes that someone will eventually find this place, that the precursor story will not end in complete obscurity, that the ruins they leave behind will be discovered, explored, understood. Learn from us, the message says. We thought we could control everything. We thought our technology made us masters of the universe. We were wrong. The universe does not yield to mastery. It yields, sometimes, to cooperation, to patience, to the humility that recognizes when help is being offered and accepts it. Did the precursor who wrote this message know about the Sea Emperor's offers? Did they understand, there at the end, what their civilization had refused? Or is this simply the wisdom that comes to all dying things, the recognition, too late, of what might have been? We cannot know. The author of the message did not survive to explain. Their body, like all precursor bodies, is gone, dissolved, decomposed, returned to the elements that briefly held the shape of a thinking being. Only the words remain, only the silence that surrounds them. The automated systems continue to function after the last precursor died. They were designed that way, built to persist, to maintain, to preserve, regardless of whether anyone remained to benefit from their operation. The lights stayed on, the power flowed, the containment fields held. The warpers continued their patrols, enforcing a quarantine on behalf of a civilization that no longer existed. And in her tank at the bottom of the world, the Sea Emperor remained, still alive, still waiting, still producing trace amounts of the enzyme that could have saved them all, if only they had found a way to accept it. She felt them die, one by one. Her telepathic awareness extended throughout the facility, perhaps throughout the entire ocean. She knew when each precursor fell silent. She knew when the last one passed beyond communication. And she knew, with the certainty that comes from millions of years of existence, that she was now alone in a way she had never been before. Not alone in the ocean, the waters of 4546b teemed with life, as they always had, but alone among minds, alone among beings capable of understanding her communications, alone with thoughts that no one could hear, wisdom that no one could receive, offers of help that no one remained to accept. Imagine that loneliness. Imagine existing for thousands of years in absolute isolation, your only companions the automated systems that maintained your prison. Imagine watching the slow decay of the facility around you, not physical decay, the precursors built too well for that, but the decay of purpose. The machines continued to function, but they no longer served anyone. The lights continued to glow, but no eyes looked upon them. The prison remained intact, but the jailers were gone, and still you could not leave. The Sea Emperor bore this loneliness with patience that defies comprehension. She did not rage, she did not despair, she waited, because she understood something that the precursors, in all their brilliance, had failed to understand. Time is longer than any individual tragedy. Civilizations rise and fall, species emerge and vanish, but life itself continues. And as long as life continues, there is hope. Somewhere she knew someone would come. Somewhere, someday, a being would arrive who was capable of hearing her, of understanding, of accepting what she offered. It might take centuries, it might take millennia, but it would happen. The universe is not empty, the silence is not permanent, and those who wait long enough, with patience enough, will eventually find that their waiting has purpose. So she waited, in the dark, in the silence, in the prison that the precursors had built to contain her, and that now contained only memory and hope. And thousands of years passed, and the ocean continued to flow. And the creatures of 4546b lived their lives without any knowledge of the ancient being imprisoned far below. And the ruins of a fallen empire stood sentinel over secrets that no one remained to keep, until one day a ship fell from the sky. The silence of millennia was broken in an instant. A streak of fire across the sky. A ship larger than anything the ocean had seen since the precursors themselves descended, tumbling through the atmosphere, systems failing, hull breaching, crew desperately trying to control a descent that could not be controlled. The Aurora, let yourself picture it, a vessel designed for the stars, built to carry colonists and cargo across the void between solar systems, suddenly reduced to a falling wreck. The drive core failing, emergency systems overwhelmed, life pods launching in desperate arcs as the main hull tore itself apart, and then impact, catastrophic, violent, final, as the great ship met the ocean and lost. The creatures of 4546b had no framework for understanding what had happened. To them, it must have seemed like the sky itself was falling, a mountain of metal and fire descending into their world, displacing water in massive waves, sending shock waves through the deep that disturbed creatures miles from the impact site. Reefbacks fled from the disturbance. Stalkers abandoned their territories. Even the reapers, territorial and fearless, retreated from the zone of destruction. And in the depths, In her prison, at the bottom of the world, the Sea Emperor felt it too. After thousands of years of silence, something new had arrived. Something different. Something that carried within it the potential she had been waiting for all along. Not the ship itself. The Aurora was just metal and technology, no more significant than the precursor vessels that had come before. What mattered was what the ship carried, who the ship carried. Survivors. Beings with minds capable of thought, of communication, of understanding. Beings who might, if they survived long enough, find their way to her. Beings who might, at last, be willing to listen. She reached out, carefully, gently, not with the full force of her telepathic ability. That might overwhelm, might frighten, might damage minds unused to such contact. Just a whisper, a suggestion, a sense of something calling from the deep, too faint to be understood, but persistent enough to be felt. On the surface, survivors struggled to stay alive. The life pods had scattered across a wide area, and most had sunk or been destroyed. Those who remained faced an immediate crisis of survival, finding food, finding water, avoiding the predators that circled curiously around the wreckage. They had no time to wonder about faint mental impressions, no space in their thoughts for anything beyond the next hour, the next meal, the next breath. But one survivor would be different. One would prove to have the persistence, the curiosity, the strange combination of desperation and wonder that would drive them deeper and deeper into the ocean. One would eventually find the precursor ruins, would read the ancient records, would understand piece by piece the story of a fallen empire and an imprisoned emperor and a cure that had been waiting for someone to claim it. We do not need to name this survivor. Perhaps you're imagining yourself in their place. Perhaps you're imagining someone else entirely. The identity matters less than the journey. The slow, gradual descent from surface survival to deep exploration, from fear to curiosity, from ignorance to understanding. The survivor began as all survivors begin, focused entirely on immediate needs. The life pod provided shelter, but not much else. Food had to be gathered from the alien ocean. Water had to be filtered and purified. Equipment had to be salvaged from the wreckage of the Aurora. Dangerous work in waters patrolled by reapers and complicated by radiation leaking from the damaged drive core. But as the days passed, as survival became less desperate and more routine, curiosity began to emerge. What was this world? What creatures swam in its depths? And what were those strange structures, angular, geometric, glowing with green light, that appeared on the scanner when the survivor ventured beyond the safe shallows? The first encounter with precursor technology must have been overwhelming. After days of dealing with alien biology, strange enough in its own right, to suddenly find evidence of artificial construction, of intelligence, of civilization. The survivor could not have known, in that first moment, what they were looking at. Could not have guessed the age of the ruins, the nature of their builders, the tragedy they represented. But they explored. Of course they explored. Humans are explorers by nature, driven by the same curiosity that sent us to every corner of Earth, and then beyond, into the void between worlds. The survivor entered the precursor structures, activated the ancient terminals, began to piece together fragments of a story that had been waiting thousands of years to be told. And as they descended, as they moved from the safe shallows to the kelp forest, from the grassy plateaus to the mushroom forest, from the blood kelp zone to the lost river, they began to feel something else, a presence, a voice, a call from somewhere far below, patient and persistent, growing clearer with every metre of depth. The Sea Emperor was reaching out. After millennia of waiting, she had finally found a mind capable of receiving her communications. Not a precursor mind, closed and controlling, but something different, something more open, something that might at last be willing to do what the precursors could not. She did not overwhelm. She did not demand. She simply called gently from the darkness. And the survivor, whether driven by curiosity or destiny or simple survival instinct, followed that call deeper and deeper into the ocean. The journey was not easy. The survivor faced challenges that would have defeated lesser beings, warpers that appeared without warning, attacking anything that showed signs of infection, leviathans that guarded their territories with lethal determination, environmental hazards that required increasingly advanced equipment to survive. And through it all, the slow dawning realization that they too were infected, that the Kera bacterium, which had destroyed the Precursors, was now destroying them. This changed everything. Survival was no longer just about finding food and avoiding predators. It was about finding a cure before the infection progressed too far. It was about understanding what the Precursors had been trying to do and why they had failed. It was about reaching the source of that calling voice and discovering whether the promises it seemed to offer were real. The disease research facility provided answers and raised new questions. The survivor learned about the Kara, about the Sea Emperor, about the enzyme that could neutralize the infection. They learned that the Precursors had failed, not because the cure was impossible, but because they could not accept the terms on which it was offered, and they made a choice the Precursors had been unable to make, a choice that would change everything. They decided to trust, not blindly, not without fear, but with the recognition that some things cannot be controlled, that some gifts can only be received with open hands, that sometimes survival requires not the assertion of dominance, but the acceptance of help. The survivor descended to the primary containment facility. They stood before the Sea Emperor Leviathan, feeling the full weight of her telepathic presence for the first time. They listened to what she had been trying to say for thousands of years, and they understood. The eggs could hatch, the enzyme could be produced, the cure could be found. All that was required was cooperation. All that was needed was to provide the hatching enzymes that the eggs required, compounds that existed in the ocean, in specific locations, waiting to be gathered by someone willing to make the journey. The survivor made that journey. They gathered what was needed. They returned to the Sea Emperor and provided the compounds that would allow her eggs to hatch at last. After thousands of years of waiting, the infant Sea Emperors were finally born. Act 8. The gift freely given. There is a moment in every great story where everything changes, where the weight of accumulated tragedy lifts, where hope becomes reality, where the long night finally gives way to dawn. For the story of the Precursors and the Sea Emperor, for the story of this ocean world, and all who have suffered within it, that moment came in the hatching of 5 small creatures in the depths of the primary containment facility. Let yourself be present for this moment. Let yourself feel what it must have been like, standing in that vast chamber, surrounded by the technology of a fallen empire, watching as the eggs that had remained dormant for millennia finally began to stir. The Sea Emperor's joy radiating through the water, through the mind, through every particle of being. After so long, after so much waiting, after thousands of years of loneliness and patience and unextinguished hope, her children were being born. The infant Sea Emperors emerged slowly, carefully, unfolding from their egg cases like flowers opening to a sun they had never seen. They were small compared to their mother, though still immense by any ordinary standard, and they glowed with the same soft bioluminescence, the same gentle presence, the same ancient wisdom that seemed to be encoded in their very cells. And they produced the enzyme, immediately, abundantly, as naturally as breathing, as effortlessly as existing. They released into the water the compound that the Precursors had sought so desperately and failed so completely to obtain. The cure. Imagine what it must have felt like for the survivor to encounter that enzyme for the first time. The infection that had been spreading through their body, the death sentence that had been counting down with every passing hour, suddenly neutralized. the green pustules fading, the cellular damage reversing, the terrible weight of mortality lifting as the body remembered how to be healthy, how to be whole, how to be alive. This was the gift the Sea Emperor had been trying to give the Precursors for thousands of years. This was what she had offered, freely, in exchange for nothing but freedom and trust. And the Precursors, in their desperation, in their need for control, had refused it, had imprisoned her instead, had watched their civilization crumble rather than accept help on terms they did not dictate. The survivor accepted. That was the difference. That was the only difference. One being, alone in an alien ocean facing death, chose to trust, chose to cooperate, chose to receive what was offered rather than trying to take it by force. And the universe responded. The cure flowed. The infection retreated. Life, which had seemed so fragile, so temporary, so close to ending, reasserted itself with quiet, unstoppable power. But the gift came with a bittersweet truth. The Sea Emperor was dying. She had known this for a long time. Perhaps she had always known. Her species was ancient, but not immortal. She had lived for millions of years, had witnessed epochs pass like seasons, had endured imprisonment and loneliness, and the extinction of her captors. And now, at last, her time was ending. Her communications to the survivor carried no fear, no regret, only a profound peace, a completion, a sense of purpose finally fulfilled. She had waited so long for this moment, had held on through millennia of solitude for exactly this purpose, to see her children born, to pass on the gift that her species carried, to ensure that the cure would exist in the world after she was gone. The infant sea emperors would carry on. They would swim out into the ocean their mother had not seen in thousands of years. They would produce the enzyme wherever they went, spreading healing through the waters, cleansing the infection that had plagued this world since the Precursors first arrived. They would live and grow, and perhaps, in time, have children of their own. The cycle would continue, life would persist, and the Sea Emperor could finally rest. Her final communications were not words exactly. They were images, feelings, impressions that transcended language. Gratitude for the being who had finally listened. Hope for the future her children would inhabit. And something that might be called love, though that word seems too small for what she expressed. A love that encompassed the survivor, the ocean, the planet, the universe itself. A love that had survived imprisonment and loneliness and the extinction of empires. A love that asked nothing in return and gave everything it had. She passed gently, peacefully, her great body settling slowly in the tank that had been her prison and was now her final resting place. The bioluminescence fading, the telepathic presence withdrawing, the ancient mind which had touched so many other minds across so many years, finally releasing its hold on consciousness. And in the waters around the facility, 5 infant sea emperors began to swim. They did not understand death as humans understand it. They did not mourn in ways we would recognize, but they carried their mother's legacy within them, in their cells, in their enzyme production, in some deeper inheritance that science cannot measure. She lived on in them. She would always live on in them, and through them her gift would continue to flow into the world. The survivor watched them go, through the observation windows of the primary containment facility, through the cameras and sensors that still functioned after all these years. They watched the infant leviathans navigate their way out of the structure that had held their mother captive, out into the lava zone, up through the lost river, into waters their species had not swum for longer than human civilization had existed. Free. The word carries so much weight in this context. Free from the tank, free from the facility, free from the legacy of precursor control, free to live as their kind was meant to live, in the open ocean, producing healing wherever they went. And the survivor was free too, free from infection, free from the death sentence that had driven their desperate exploration. Free to live, to breathe, to continue existing in a world that had seemed determined to kill them. Two freedoms intertwined. The survivors and the leviathans, each making the other possible, each depending on the other for its existence. This is what the Precursors could never understand. Freedom is not a zero-sum game. It is not something that must be hoarded, controlled, taken from others to be possessed oneself. It is something that multiplies when shared. The Sea Emperor's freedom would have given the Precursors their freedom. Freedom from the infection, freedom from extinction, freedom from the desperate grasping that consumed their final years. But they could not see it. They could not accept that giving freedom might be the path to receiving it. The survivor saw. The survivor understood. And in that understanding, everything changed. The infant sea emperors scattered throughout the ocean. In time, they would be seen in nearly every biome. Great shapes moving through the water, trailing enzyme behind them, cleansing the Kara wherever they went. Creatures that had been infected for generations would heal. Ecosystems that had been subtly distorted by the presence of the bacterium would return to their natural balance. The ocean would become, slowly but surely, what it had been before the Precursors ever arrived. And in the primary containment facility, the body of the Sea Emperor remained. Still, silent, at peace. She had waited thousands of years for this moment. She had endured what no creature should ever have to endure. And in the end, she had won. Not through force, not through resistance, but through patience and love, and an unshakable faith that someday someone would listen. The Precursors built their facility to be a prison. They built it to contain, to control, to dominate. But in the end, it became something else entirely. It became a birthplace, a site of healing, a monument not to Precursor power, but to the power of trust, of cooperation, of gifts freely given and gratefully received. The silence that fills it now is different from the silence of the other ruins. It is not the silence of failure. It is the silence of completion, of purpose fulfilled, of a story that, after so many millennia, has finally reached its proper end. Act 9. What remains? The Precursors are gone. This is the truth we must sit with as our journey nears its end. A civilization that spanned star systems, that built wonders, that endure for millennia, that possessed technology beyond our comprehension, gone. Not a single living Precursor remains anywhere in the known universe, as far as we can determine. Their empire has collapsed into silence. Their people have passed beyond memory. Only their ruins remain, scattered across worlds they once dominated, waiting for visitors who will never fully understand what they have found. Let yourself feel the weight of that. Let yourself sit with the enormity of extinction. Not just personal death, which comes to all living things, but the death of an entire way of being. Every Precursor who ever lived, every thought they ever had, every relationship they ever formed, every hope and fear and moment of joy, all of it gone, erased from the universe as completely as if it had never existed at all. This is what awaits every civilization eventually. The Precursors were not special in their mortality. They were only special in how long they endured before mortality claimed them. Thousands of years, perhaps millions, of existence and then nothing. The same nothing that awaits us all. And yet their ruins still stand. And yet their technology still functions. And yet the story of what they did here, on this small ocean world, can still be pieced together from fragments and echoes and the fading glow of ion energy. They are gone, but they are not. Entirely forgotten. Something of them persists, even now, even after all this time. What remains of the Precursors on 4546b? The structures remain. The disease research facility in the Lost River, the primary containment facility in the depths, the scattered outposts and caches throughout the ocean, each one containing technology that still works, still hums with power, still waits for users who will never come. These buildings were designed to last, and last they have, long after the hands that built them have turned to dust, long after the minds that designed them have ceased to think. The structures persist, silent, patient, eternal. The warpers remain. Those unsettling constructs, neither fully biological nor fully mechanical, still patrol the waters of 4546b. They no longer serve any meaningful purpose. The quarantine they were designed to enforce has been rendered obsolete by the cure, but they do not know this. They cannot know this. They are programmed, not conscious. They execute their directives without understanding, without adaptation, without any capacity to recognize that the world has changed and their mission is complete. Perhaps they will patrol forever, or until their biological components finally fail. Perhaps they are the truest legacy of precursor desperation, creatures that cannot stop fighting a war that ended millennia ago. The data remains. Thousands of records stored in terminals throughout the precursor facilities, containing fragments of knowledge that we are only beginning to understand. Scientific observations, personal logs, technical specifications, historical accounts, the accumulated wisdom of a civilization far older and far more advanced than our own, preserved in formats that human technology can only partially access. Each terminal is a window into a lost world. Each record is a voice from beyond extinction, still speaking to anyone patient enough to listen. And the Sea Emperor's body ushers remains. In the tank where she spent her final millennia, in the prison that became her birthplace and her deathbed, her physical form still rests. It has not decayed. Something about the facility's environment, or perhaps something about her biology, has preserved it. She lies there still, vast and silent, a monument to patience and love and the ultimate triumph of cooperation over control. Visitors who find their way to the primary containment facility can see her, can stand in the presence of a being who witnessed geological ages pass like moments, can feel perhaps some faint echo of the wisdom she embodied. What does not remain is what mattered most, the living precursors themselves, their ongoing civilization, their capacity to grow, to change, to learn from the mistakes recorded in their own archives. The ruins are remarkable, yes. The technology is invaluable. But the beings who created these things, who understood them fully, who could have taught us so much about the universe and our place in it, they are gone. And nothing we find in their facilities can bring them back. This is the tragedy that underlies everything we have explored tonight. Not just that the precursors died, but that they died having learned the lesson too late. Their final records show understanding. Their last messages contain wisdom. They knew in the end where they had gone wrong. They knew that control was not the answer. They knew that trust, cooperation, humility before the vastness of the universe, these were the qualities that might have saved them. But knowing was not enough. The infection had spread too far. The empire had collapsed too completely. The opportunity for a different choice had passed, and all that remained was regret. Is this perhaps the most important thing the precursors have to teach us? Not their technology, impressive as it is, not their science, advanced as it was, but their failure. Their reminder that even the most powerful civilizations can fall, that even the greatest achievements can be undone by a single pathogen, a single mistake, a single refusal to accept help when it was offered. They were not so different from us in the end. They had the same drives, the same fears, the same desperate need to control their circumstances and master their fate. They reached for the stars and grasped them. They built wonders that outlasted their own existence, and when the crisis came, when everything they had built was threatened, they responded with the same instincts that drive all frightened beings, grasping tighter, controlling harder, refusing to let go, even when letting go was the only path to salvation. We can judge them for this. We can look at their ruins and feel superior, secure in the knowledge that we would have made different choices. But would we? Facing extinction, watching our loved ones die, seeing everything we had worked for crumble around us, would we have the wisdom to trust, the humility to accept help, the courage to release control? The Precursors could not, and they paid the ultimate price, but they also left us a gift. In their failure, they left a lesson. In their ruins, they left a warning. In the story of the Sea Emperor, imprisoned and patient, waiting for someone willing to listen, they left a model for a different way of being. Trust is possible. Cooperation works. Gifts freely given can save what force cannot preserve. This is what remains of the Precursors. Not just buildings and technology and data terminals, but a story, a cautionary tale, a reminder that the universe is larger than any empire, older than any civilization, and ultimately indifferent to the ambitions of those who would master it. And a hope. Because if the Precursors could not learn this lesson in time, perhaps we can. Perhaps their sacrifice, if sacrifice is the right word, was not entirely in vain. Perhaps somewhere, somewhen, a civilization facing its own crisis will remember what happened here. We'll choose differently. We'll trust when trust seems impossible, cooperate when cooperation seems weakness, accept help when pride demands self-sufficiency. Perhaps that is the true legacy of the Precursors. Not what they built, but what they teach us about building. Not what they achieved, but what they show us about the limits of achievement. Not their success, but their failure, and the wisdom that failure can impart to those willing to learn from it. The water around us grows still. The ruins glow with their eternal green light. And somewhere in the ocean above, 5 infant sea emperors swim freely, carrying within them the cure that the Precursors died seeking. This is what remains. This is what endures. This is what the silence, after all these millennia, still has to say. And so we come to the end of our journey. Not the end of the story. Stories like this one never truly end. They simply pause, waiting for the next voice to pick them up and carry them forward. But the end of this particular telling, the end of this particular night, the end of one long slow descent into the depths of history and back again. Let yourself rise now, gently, gradually, the way we descended. Let the ruins of the Precursors fall away below you, their green lights fading into the darkness, like stars sinking beneath a horizon. Let the weight of millennia lift from your shoulders, replaced by something lighter, something more peaceful. The weight of understanding, perhaps, or simply the weight of rest, long deserved and finally arriving. The ocean around you grows warmer as you ascend. The pressure eases. The darkness gives way to the deep blue of the twilight zone, and then to the brighter blue of waters touched by distant sunlight. Life becomes more abundant, schools of fish darting past, creatures going about their daily business, an entire world that exists without any knowledge of the ancient tragedy that unfolded in the depths below. This is how it should be. This is how it has always been. The surface knows nothing of the deep. The present knows nothing of the past. Life continues, generation after generation, without carrying the full weight of everything that came before. And perhaps this is a mercy. Perhaps forgetting is as necessary as remembering. Perhaps the ocean's creatures are wise in their ignorance, free from the burden of history that thinking beings must carry. But we are not ignorant, not anymore. We have descended into the ruins. We have read the records. We have stood in the presence of the Sea Emperor's body and felt, however faintly, the echo of her ancient patience. We know what happened here. We know what the Precursors built and why they failed. We know about the Kara and the cure and the gift that was offered and refused and finally, after thousands of years, accepted. This knowledge is ours now. This story lives in us. And when we sleep tonight, when we finally let go of waking consciousness and drift into whatever dreams may come, we will carry it with us into that other world The world of sleep, the world where memory and imagination blend together, where time flows differently, where the boundaries between self and universe grow thin and permeable. Perhaps you will dream of the Precursors tonight. Perhaps you will walk through their facilities, not as a visitor, but as one of them, feeling their hopes, sharing their fears, understanding from the inside what it was like to face extinction and refuse to accept it. Perhaps you will stand before the Sea Emperor in your dreams, not separated by glass and water, but close enough to touch, close enough to feel the full force of her telepathic presence. Perhaps she will speak to you in that language beyond words, and you will understand things that waking consciousness cannot grasp. Or perhaps your dreams will take you somewhere else entirely. The Precursor story is vast, and there are corners of it we have not explored tonight. Other worlds they visited, other species they encountered, other tragedies and triumphs that unfolded across the millennia of their existence. Your sleeping mind may wander into these unexplored territories, creating its own versions of what might have been. This is the gift of stories. They do not end when the telling stops. They continue in the minds of those who have heard them, transforming, evolving, becoming something new with each retelling. The Precursors are gone, but their story lives on, in the ruins they left behind, in the records that patient explorers have recovered, and now in you, in the imagination that will carry these images into sleep and bring back something changed, something personal, something that belongs to you alone. Let yourself receive this gift. Let the story settle into your mind like sediment settling to the ocean floor. You do not need to hold it tightly. You do not need to remember every detail. The important things will stay with you. The feeling of ancient ruins glowing in the darkness. The patience of the Sea Emperor waiting for someone to listen. The lesson of trust and cooperation, of gifts freely given and gratefully received. These things are yours now. They will be with you when you wake. The safe shallows appear around you. Coral tubes rise toward a surface that glitters with the light of alien suns. Peepers drift past, their curious eyes catching your presence and then moving on. The world is bright here, warm, alive, so different from the deep places we have visited, and yet connected to them. All part of the same ocean, all part of the same world, all part of the same vast, mysterious, beautiful reality that encompasses everything from the surface to the depths, from the present to the ancient past. You have made this journey. You have descended into darkness and returned. You have learned what the Precursors could not learn in time, and what the Sea Emperor spent millennia trying to teach. You have touched something ancient and carried it back into the light. Now it is time to rest. Let your eyes grow heavy. Let your breathing slow to match the rhythm of gentle waves. Let the thoughts that have carried you through this journey begin to fade, replaced by the soft emptiness that precedes sleep. You have done enough. You have learned enough. You have been present enough for one night. The ocean will still be here when you wake. The ruins will still glow in the depths. The story will still wait, patient as the Sea Emperor herself, ready to be revisited whenever you choose to return. But for now, you can let it go. You can trust that it will be there tomorrow, and the day after, and all the days that follow. Some things endure, some things persist. Some things, once known, can never be truly lost. Thank you for joining me on this journey into the past. Thank you for your patience, your attention, your willingness to descend into difficult waters and sit with difficult truths. Thank you for caring about a civilization that vanished millennia ago, and for honouring the memory of beings who made mistakes we might easily make ourselves. The Precursors are gone, but tonight, for a little while, they were remembered. Tonight, their story was told again. And that is a kind of survival too, a kind of persistence, a way of continuing beyond extinction in the minds and hearts of those who take the time to listen. Sleep now. Let the alien ocean carry you into rest. Let the ghosts of the Precursors watch over your dreams, not as haunting presences, but as quiet companions. They have much to teach us still, if we are willing to learn. And the best learning often happens in sleep, when the mind is open and the barriers are down, and wisdom can slip in through doors that waking consciousness keeps firmly closed. The Sea Emperor knew this. She waited for thousands of years, patient and trusting, knowing that eventually someone would come, someone would listen, someone would understand. Tonight you have been that someone. Tonight you have listened. And tomorrow, when you wake, you will carry something of her patience, her wisdom, her unshakable faith in the power of trust. But that is tomorrow. Tonight is for rest. Tonight is for letting go. Tonight is for drifting, like a creature of the deep, through waters that ask nothing of you except that you surrender to their embrace. Good night. Sleep well, and may your dreams be touched by ancient things, gentle, patient, wise, that swim through the depths of imagination, just as the Sea Emperor once swam through the depths of an alien sea. Thank you for listening.